I'm going to expand on something that I have talked about a lot before, and that is my belief that Viserion and Rhaegal were the failed forgings of Lightbringer, with Drogon being the third, final, and successful attempt. This is because Drogon specifically was the third and final hatching, the third and final attempt that was brought forth after Daenerys walks into the pyre, that was brought forth from a willing self-sacrifice. And that's what we learn in the original mythos of Azor Ahai. If Nissa Nissa had not come willingly bearing her breast, this would not have worked. Because otherwise, it's just Azor Ahai killing his wife. But her willingness, that is the magical element that creates a weapon of light and hope. Something else that the mythos of Azor Ahai and the Forging of Lightbringer teaches us is that sacred fire alone is not enough to forge Lightbringer. Sacred fire and blood is not enough to forge Lightbringer. Sacred fire, blood, and willing self-sacrifice are the three elements required to forge Lightbringer. 3 heads has the dragon, child of 3. So, while sacred fire and a blood sacrifice, only death can pay for life, was sufficient to birth dragons, Viserion and Rhaegal, it was insufficient to make either of them Lightbringer. That does not happen until that magical third element of self-sacrifice occurs when Daenerys walks into the pyre. I believe that these machinations, these specific sacrifices, and the specifics of those sacrifices, as well as the placement of the eggs on the pyre, reveal foreshadowing of the role that each of these dragons will play in Daenerys' story and the story as a whole. The first dragon that hatches is Viserion, and Dany looks into the flames and she sees Drogo mounting a fiery stallion, and he cracks his whip and ascends to the Nightlands, and we hear the first cracking. The egg rolls to her feet, broken, and it is Viserion's egg. This establishes that Viserion's hatching correlates with Drogo's sacrifice. Drogo's sacrifice was an act of mercy, but it was not an act of willing self-sacrifice. So again, it was enough to bring Viserion to life, but it was not enough to forge Lightbringer. Now, the placement of the egg, Viserion's egg, is placed in Drogo's groin area. That, coupled with my belief that Viserion is a laying dragon who will survive the series to herald a new generation of deified dragons among the Dothraki, leads me to associate Daenerys' legacy with Viserion. And there's so much poetry in the sacrifice that brought forth Viserion being Khal Drogo, and by proxy Rhaego, who was sacrificed for Drogo, to have that dragon become Daenerys' lasting legacy of freedom is beautiful. Now, the second hatching and the second sacrifice is the murder of Mirri Maz Duur and the hatching of Rhaegal. This was obviously not an act of willing self-sacrifice, but it did have sacred fire and blood. Now, we see throughout the series that there is a disconnect between Rhaegal and Daenerys. There's even an instance where he bites her very hard. So I believe that the murder of Mirri Maz Duur being the sacrifice that brought forth Rhaegal is going to have long-term implications for Daenerys, meaning it's going to bite her in the ass. And I think we're already seeing it. I think that it has primed Rhaegal to become the dragon of opposition for Daenerys. The dragon who, like Mirri, is going to teach Dany very painful lessons about how a dragon is not a slave. Yes, they are all bound to her as their mother, but they ultimately all have minds of their own. As for the placement, Rhaegal's egg is placed next to Drogo's head, and in my mind, I associate the mind with these lessons. Now, Drogon's egg was placed next to Drogo's heart, and I see this, one, as a nod to the original mythos of the Forging of Lightbringer, in which Nissa Nissa is stabbed through the breast, and 2, because I associate the heart with destiny, and I think that as Lightbringer, Drogon is linked to Daenerys' destiny as Azor Ahai. So you have hatching first, Viserion, legacy; hatching second, Rhaegal, opposition; and hatching third, Drogon, Lightbringer. This gives us kind of a silly acronym, which is LOL. But do you know who else has that acronym? Daenerys. Daenerys means Lady of Light, Lady of Hope in Welsh. Lady of Light, LOL. So you have the 3 heads of the dragon that make up the Lady of Light. And it ultimately foreshadows and summarizes her entire character arc, as well as like a general arc for the whole narrative. If you have questions, if this is like your first time hearing some of this stuff, about the machinations involved in the birthing of the dragons, like how I determined who was sacrificed for which dragon, what order they were hatched in, anything like that, please check out my Dany and Her Dragons playlist. It's got a lot of really good stuff there, and it's got individual videos on each dragon's role. So an individual video on Viserion as Legacy, Rhaegal as Opposition, and Drogon as Lightbringer. And if none of this is new to you, thank you for being here for as long as you've been here, since the fucking beginning, when I was really, fighting for my voice here. So thank you for welcoming my voice and making space for my voice and encouraging my voice. You guys are awesome.